Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pathways to Excellence. Today, I am very honored to have with me right here Datin Noor Azimah Rahim, the chairperson of PAGE, the Parents. I'm sorry.
Action Group for Education.
It's right at the back of the Malaysian Education Blueprint, so don't you forget it. Sorry, just a hint. Datin, it's an absolute honor to have you here with us today. And ladies and gentlemen, we have here one of the country's foremost advocates for English language education. And Datin, I think that like many of us have seen you really in like the news. We see you essentially as that person who essentially, speaks about English language education. Your statements, they are vociferous. They are, shall we say, almost, I don't want to say damning, but I will say like essentially they are, always instructive to the government of the day to essentially tell them this is important, this is something that we should care about. Why is it something that you care about, English education?
I think it's quite obvious
Mm-hmm.
that the language of knowledge is the English language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we gain in that the English language has always been our second language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, the English language is being relegated to our detriment. And to the detriment of the country and to the economy, because we're serious about going into digital, digital education, digital economy, STEM. It has to be learned in the English language.
Nice.
It's so obvious, because and also before the public would say, why can't the Japanese do it? The Germans could do it in their own language, Korean, etc. Why can't we do it? It is because we've not got the knowledge, and the knowledge comes in English language. We need to learn that, because if we are relying on translation, by the time we translate whatever is written into Bahasa Melayu, technology is evolving so fast that by the time we get our translation is in order, the train's left the station. So this is nothing. This is not what I'm saying. It's not an original. Everybody knows that, but I think it was Tun Mahathir who actually brought it into motion when he introduced the policy of science, maths, and English in 2003. He saw it coming. I mean, we all know him as a visionary leader. He saw it coming, and if we didn't do anything about it, we'll be even further behind. We've seen Vietnam overtake us. Right, Vietnam has they've got it. They got the English language going. And forget about Singapore and India already. And now we have, after the World Bank report, we have Cambodia even ahead of us.
Yeah.
In some cases. So I think let's not ponder over this anymore. There's no more time to think. We have to act on it.
All right then. So, if you could maybe tell me a little bit about H. Well, what does H normally do?
Well, obviously, we really rely on the media uh, to push for what we believe in. We couldn't actually do it on our own. Again, PH, as most people know, we started in 2008 at the height of the debate on the teaching and learning of science, maths, and English, which was started by Tamadeh. The policy had started in 2003, was already ongoing in all schools. And then there was this hesitation or reluctance to continue. They wanted to review the success of the policy. So in 2008, they had a series of debates with different target audiences. And when we set ourselves up in the school canteen, where the committee of PAGE started off in the PIBG committee, we decided that we would make a call to the Ministry of Education. So a few of us went to see one of the special officers of the Minister of Education then, which was Dr. Sheikh Shamuddin. And he said, you know, we're having these debates and we are going to have our next debate, which will be the fourth. Would you like to do a presentation in favor of the policy? We said, this is fantastic. We're not going to register, you know, organization. We're just a loose bunch of parents, but we've got this platform. So we grabbed at it. We worked day and night for our presentation. And the audience was politicians.
Wow.
We had all the heads of political parties in the audience. You know, that was fantastic. Of course, you know, I presented in Bahasa Melayu. And I was rather surprised. I got a standing ovation for my presentation.
Wow.
Either because the presentation was good or because they were ready for lunch. Because I was holding everybody up for lunch. So anyway, everybody was very happy, but in the end, we needed a leader in the Ministry of Education. It wasn't the minister. He was busy with other things, but his Deputy Education Minister was the late Datin Noor Azimah was very prominent in ensuring that the policy continued. He gave us all the support the ministry needed, you know, for us to push, get media coverage, etc.
Wow.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, just a few weeks after getting to know him, he passed away from a heart attack while playing badminton.
That's very
I think
unfortunate.
that was so crucial because after that, a few months later, there was a change of minister. Dr. Sri Hishamuddin left without making a decision on PPSMI. And then Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin came in. He was also Deputy Prime Minister at the time. So came in and there was the debates continued. And then at some point he decided that it was not working and he decided to abolish it,
Interesting.
which was very painful for us.
I can imagine, yes.
There was also a huge protest led by PAS against the policy.
Wow.
So in the end, I think it wasn't whether the policy was a failure or a success. It was more a political decision.
I see.
So in the end, that was 2008 when the debates were going on. In 2009, 6 years after the policy had been conducted in schools, it was abolished. The only consolation was that they had a soft landing, which meant that those who were already starting doing thought, science and maths and English, they could continue until SPM. So even though it was officially abolished in 2009, the children could still continue. Those who had started continued until they finished SPM 2020. So that was the last batch for PPSMI, SPM in 2020.
I see. Okay. So like,
Unfortunately, not everybody followed through. The schools that were very confident with this policy continued until SPM 2020. A lot of them dropped out. A lot of them just switched into BM, whether or not capitalizing on the soft landing.
I see.
A lot of schools just went BM overnight and let it fail.
Right. And I also had some personal experience of that, at the very least in my school, whereby I had gone to school during the years of the PPSMI. I remember that my Form 3 teacher actually came to class with a blank stare on her face. I recall that we were supposed to learn things in English, but then she began speaking in PM, which was, I guess, like characteristic of some of what we saw during that time. But there's a lot to really follow up on that right there. And it's really impressive, I must say, Datin, that you guys went from essentially being, would it be accurate actually to say that you were, well, a loosely gathered bunch of parents that eventually like got to the point of like speaking essentially to the leaders of the country, like during that part of your journey into
Yeah, I think they were desperate for people who were in favor of the policy.
desperate for people who are in favor of the policy. Well, I mean, to even doubt that, right? So then it's interesting because when we think really about PPSMI and a lot of the sort of debates that have come in right there, so we know of course that Dr. Mahathir essentially bulldozed the PPSMI, right? Like he essentially just pushed it through and essentially made it happen right there. Like, do you remember like what was happening during that time as well?
Yeah, because they knew that the teachers couldn't hack it.
Mhm.
You know, because teachers coming from a Malay medium environment. Although, if we look at the background of teachers who teach science and maths, they all have minors in English. Okay, so they actually do speak English, but nonetheless, they all came from Malay medium
I see.
background, right? So, which is why I think at that point in time, they either spent 3 billion or 5 billion, which is a lot of money then in 2003, to buy hardware and software.
I see.
You know, so that teachers could use these tools to basically teach the students, and the teachers just became facilitators. That was the idea. We even had a few countries coming to see what we were doing, you know, and I think it worked for some time until some teachers got lazy or they got too comfortable and they started to find ways and means to fall back into their comfort zones.
Okay.
Because you know, they you know, you're supposed to play the software. You have to make sure your tools are well maintained. You know, they don't break down. You had LCDs in every classroom. All these need maintenance.
Okay.
You know, and in fact, I think what they did was they had every school had a technical assistant in the office. So every time there was a breakdown, there would be somebody to do this.
Okay, I see.
You know, but also on the other hand, also some people will say, this technical assistant weren't very technical. They ended up just being office boys.
Okay.
So there were lots of challenges.
I can imagine, yeah.
But you know, I think if teachers were believed in the policy, they wanted to make a success of it. I think all these challenges can be confronted and addressed.
Cool. Do you remember the context of how you discovered for the first time that there was a push to teach science and math in English in Malaysia? And do you remember the point at which you first decided this is something that I need to support?
It's an obvious thing because I even got to know the late Dato Hassan Harun, I think, came to look for me, you know, because he told me when the first book on biotechnology came out
Mhm.
and it was written in English,
Mhm.
took the book to Tun Mahathir.
Mhm.
And he told Tun Mahathir, you need to translate this to Bahasa Melayu because we need to know the knowledge in this book.
Mhm.
So Tun Mahathir told him, we haven't got translators.
Mhm.
We haven't got that kind of expertise to translate into Bahasa Melayu. So Tun Mahathir told him, you do it and you come back to me when you're done. It took 4 years to translate the book. And when he came back to Tun Mahathir with that translation, it was already obsolete.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a real inside story, you know. Yeah, so which is why this is the background of why, how, and why this policy started.
Wow. And you know, a lot of times, Datin, you know, a lot of news stories, right? They present this idea really of PPSMI or essentially English language learning, right? As a sort of like, threat or crisis that has been brought upon identity. Now, you've mentioned also that, like, when you gave your presentation about essentially, the continuation really of this policy, you mentioned that you spoke in Malay. Like, do you feel that in any sense that in fact learning English might be considered to be a threat to one's identity? And in fact, I have more to say about that in relation to Dr. Mahathir as well. I'd like to first hear your take on it.
Yeah, because all this started. We were doing fine with English medium schools.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you look at the background of English medium schools, you could see that there was more mix of races in our medium English medium schools than in the other schools. And it was after the May 1969 riots that things changed into Malay medium
Right.
as the main instruction in
Right.
schools. A lot of people who don't know this always blame it on but it's actually the education minister then was Abdul Rahman Yaakob. He was actually he's from Sarawak. He wasn't even an UMNO member. But nonetheless, at the time, Tun Razak was the prime minister, and he told Abdurrahman Yaakob, "We need a Malaysian identity post May 1969. So what can you do about it?" So he suggested that we should switch our medium instruction into Malay. So that's what happened. In fact, if you read Tun Mahathir's Doctor in the House book, he writes that this didn't even go to the cabinet. It was just a decision between Tun Abdul Razak and Abdul Rahman Yaakob that switch to Malay medium schools because the country needed a national identity.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in January 1970, they started to do this Malay medium
I see.
schools.
I see. Okay.
Medium schools were abolished, and then there was an outcry from the vernacular schools, and then the vernacular schools were allowed to continue, and you see how they have they have succeeded
I see.
alongside national schools.
I see. Okay. So then, in your mind, Datin, can I get how you feel about the importance, right, of using Malay as a medium of instruction in the service of building what we call national identity?
Yeah, I think it's important that we have a national identity. It's fine. It's fine. I think we need a national identity. Being a Malaysian, every needs the needs the school for sure.
For sure.
There's no compromise. But I think along the way, in the I don't know this need to have national language, national identity. The English language was left to decline.
Decline.
That was a mistake. Why did it need to be a zero-sum game? We're still talking about that. Why did it need to be a zero? Why couldn't the children in schools learn both languages? Why can't they be good in both languages? That was a mistake for the Ministry of Education to let the English language decline. And look where we are now. If English language teachers can't speak English. What we've been saying is, okay, forget English medium schools. It's not going to happen. Everybody's so hung up against English medium schools. Politically, it's not happening. You're going to get such a bad backlash. So let's do this. This is something I've been talking about for some years already. We need better English language teachers. But the way they're doing it, it's not happening. The English language teachers are just mediocre, actually. So what we need is change some national schools into English medium schools strictly for B40 and strictly to produce English language teachers. Let's do that. Just try. How many English teachers do you need for that state? Just have one school, let them produce the English language teachers. I think that is so workable. You're not even talking about building another school. Just find an existing school which fits this purpose. And that have every state have one school to start with.
Okay.
And I don't think the sultans will be against it. In fact, Sultan Johor has spoken about English speaking schools.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have this English medium school just to produce the teachers.
I see.
4B40. And I know the other sultans are all very progressive.
Mm.
Kelantan, there was an article recent that the most number of Malay students in Chinese schools come from Kelantan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So try giving them the English. Kelantan has produced many professionals who have left the state, including our Chief Justice, right? Tun Tengku Aiman. Look where she is now. So I think this is very workable if we are serious about improving the English language. Not much effort, but I think the results will be different.
Wonderful. Well, given that we're thinking about this right here, well, you've got essentially a very progressive, shall we say, leadership, right? Royalty, like essentially the council of rulers, all of whom have received this incredible education from some of the best institutions in the world. I mean, so at the same time though, you still have all of these people who are going on social media and then they are essentially, screaming out, we need to mansuhkan sekolah vernacular. Or basically like, they will essentially go about and say that, we have to, enforce, right, like the Malay language right here. I'm not sure if you agree with me, a gap between the leaders and essentially the people. Do you feel that that's fair to say, or maybe is that more of what we call an online echo chamber?
Vernacular school. I think after that hot case, I think there's nothing more to say really. I mean, they're here to stay.
They're here to stay, absolutely.
And I think that if the leaders really want to not popularize vernacular schools, they have to make national schools better.
I see.
The answer is not to abolish vernacular schools. Anyway, it's not going to happen anyway. So that case, right? It is appealing, right? The answer is to make national schools better.
I see.
Make them as good as international schools. Then you see the exodus.
I see. Okay. So I'd like to ask a direct follow-up question on what you said earlier. So you said that we have to make national schools better. Okay. Now, of course, reforms may take a while. There's no guarantee, no teleological arc towards which, like any educational system, complex in its nature, will eventually go towards. And so when we look at, parents nowadays, so they choose, in many cases, the international schools that you have mentioned. They send their children over to Garden International School, for example, which will essentially charge them maybe upwards of 100,000 every single year, and the price of that increases maybe about 10% on average every single year. Education, all things essentially remaining equal, is one of the most inflation-heavy industries in the entire world right here. And so when you think about this right here, do you feel that maybe there is an element of a gap essentially appearing between the rich and the poor when we think about like the state of national schools vis-a-vis, international schools as time goes by?
Well, I think that was the creation of the Ministry of Education. Because before, international schools, to enroll your child into an international school was very difficult. Unless one parent was a foreigner, you couldn't enroll in an international school.
Right.
But the Ministry of Education decided to relax the rules. So now, if both parents are Malaysian, they can still enroll their children.
Right. And that was a policy shift in 2006, right? Apparently, they wanted to make Malaysia into an educational hub along the way.
Yeah. Ministers wanted to send their children to international schools. That's why they changed the law.
Wow.
We're still stuck in national schools.
That is an epic scale abrogation of responsibility. It's like instead of reforming the education system and like fixing the trouble in your own neighborhood, you sign a bill into law that allows you to avert that responsibility, thereby allowing you, who is paid a ministerial salary, to essentially enroll your child into one of those schools in the very first place.
There you go.
Yeah.
We even have a minister
Yeah.
who turned an all-girls school into a mixed school because he wanted his son to go into the. His son would go to the all-girls school with his daughter.
I see. Wow.
So that was my school. It was an all-girls school, and now it's a mixed school.
Incidentally, wow.
I think this is the same minister who relaxed the rules with international schools.
Wow. Okay. Could you share a little bit about your educational background and what disposed you eventually towards, preferring an English language education as well?
Well, I came from mission school. I learned science, maths, and English.
Mhm.
So it's not just in 2003 that students were learning science and maths and English. We already had it in the 70s, And then after that came the Malay medium instruction thing. I mean, I did history and geography in Malay, but science and maths was still in English, and I became an accountant after that. This is another thing I would like to do. I think accounts in school should be taught English, but that's a different ballgame altogether.
Okay.
Right? We're already having so much difficulty with science and maths. I think economics and accounts should be taught in English, because especially accounts, because in the end, you after school you may do your degree, or you may even go straight into your professionals. Professional exams for accountancy are conducted in English.
Yes.
And they keep saying year after year there's a shortage of Putra accountants. Why? Because they haven't got the English proficiency right.
I see.
That is the reason for it. There's a lack of knowledge.
I see. Okay. Yeah, and that's interesting because a lot of times, well, you see that some advocates, so ministers, for example, right? So like maybe in the service of political convenience or otherwise, I wouldn't presume to speak for any individual minister right there. Then they essentially go about, well, spreading this rhetoric, really. You mentioned that PAS essentially had protested the PPSMI right there. And one has to wonder, though, if like the PAS ministers send their kids to, national schools or international schools. Don't know the answer to that question, but, well, you have...
Most likely religious schools and vernacular schools.
Okay, religious schools and vernacular schools. Okay.
To learn Mandarin.
Wow, English is out of fashion now.
No, if you can't get English, you go for the Mandarin.
Okay.
That's what's happening in schools now. You can't get the dual language program.
Yeah.
You leave the national school system. You go to vernacular school because you can get the Mandarin.
Okay, wow. Speaking of ministers, Datin, okay, I have a question then about a suggestion that was made to me by the head of Khazanah Research. He says that if he were to do this, then it would change the education system in nothing more than a stroke of a pen. He says, so this is Nicholas Call, by the way, he says that if ministers were legally required to send their children to the national schools within their constituency, then it would change things because it would give them skin in the game. Like, how likely do you think that is to be the case?
I think that's happening already. I think it's not written, but it's understood that if you are Minister of Education, at least then your children need to go to a national school. But I also know that this particular minister, the day he left the ministry to join another ministry, his children, the maid went to pick the two children from school and put them in international school.
I see.
He didn't waste the day.
A bit of a shock, but okay. Okay then. Now let's go over to, I guess, some of the debates that you were mentioning concerning, well, the change, essentially, of PPSMI into a world where that PPSMI did not exist. Now, I actually had a chance to read a little bit about the PPSMI on the Malay Wikipedia page dedicated towards it, by no means the best possible source. But essentially, what was said at that point, and this is something that has been echoed really, some English teachers maintain that, do you know that Malay is the language that is most spoken in this country? Do you know how inhumane it would be to force these people to learn science and math in a language that is not their first?
Actually, the children learn best as young as they are. You know, the propensity to learn is highest the younger you are, right? And as you get older, it diminishes. So why not? How can you survive with just? How can you survive with by being monolingual? Isn't it good to learn more than one language? We should be, in a country like us, we should be speaking 3 languages.
Right.
Why stop children from learning another language or other languages? And in fact, even if you look at science and maths, or even science, just science in English in standard 1, standard 2, standard 3, there's nothing scientific about it. Just widening the English vocabulary, because all you learn about is plants, animals, fauna, flora. That's about it. It's nothing scientific. It's just widening your English vocabulary for science. Then 1 to 3. Only in Singapore it gets a bit technical, you know. You learn for inferences and all that, right?
I see.
Why not?
I see. Okay.
Because imagine trying to learn a second language when you're 30, for instance. It'll be very difficult.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I know that.
And kids, they absorb like a sponge. The younger they are. That is the time you want to get them to learn as many languages as possible.
I see. Okay.
Isn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, even speaking as a teacher myself right here, like I can accept on some level that maybe it is true that if you have essentially Chinese, for example, as your first language, then you are more likely to be able to take in certain kinds of information, when it is presented to you in Chinese. But of course, what you pointed out is especially relevant, especially since when you are a child, right, you may not actually be learning like the skills of inferences that you said, but also the skills of scientific research per se, right? And although it might be that you might be less able to absorb like the certain facts, right? Like because you have to essentially translate it into your L1, use the terminology of ELT, the fact remains that it is as you said, well, they are learning vocabulary and not necessarily ways of thinking right there. And it will dispose them in many ways to learn better things in the future.
I think that it was Tumade who said that in Malay there's just oxygen, right?
Yeah.
But the scientific term for oxygen in science, there are actually 10 types of oxygen, which is not expressed in the Malay language.
I see.
Which is why he's so into it.
I see. Okay. Wow, fascinating. And I would also bear in mind that Dr. Mahathir is the author of The Malay Dilemma. And he is essentially the person who had proposed at some earlier point that, well, assistance needs to be rendered essentially to the Malays in the interest of essentially preserving identity and various other things of that nature. Yet it was that very same man who had written that piece. I don't know to what extent he disavows it in the modern age, but it was the man who produced that book who stands essentially as an advocate for English language education in so many ways. So
I think he realized it in the end.
He realized it in the end.
There's no two ways about it. You just have to learn it.
You have to learn it, absolutely.
You know, as much as he is a nationalist, you cannot just live by being a nationalist. You have to bring more to that.
I see. Cool. So maybe let's think then about this idea, right? That an English language education might be something that favors the elite in some ways. I know that we talked a little bit about, well, the national schools, and we also talked about how national schools are maybe lacking in some way right here on account maybe of a lack of provision of quality English teaching talent, or maybe for other reasons, for example, such as the reality that not everybody speaks English as their first language at home, right? Now, some people maintain essentially that when it comes to, say, education, right? So then what actually does happen is that, well, the successors really of parents will trickle down essentially into their children along the way. And some people view English language education as something that essentially, well, will benefit essentially the elite much more. While at the same time, a Malay language education will host a broader base that will have a greater capacity to uplift essentially the entire population as a whole, the nation of Malaysia. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we've been trying to make Bahasa Melayu an international language for the longest time, and we have failed. I think Indonesians have done it better. For instance, if you go to if you go study abroad and they want you to go another language, you're not likely to be offered Bahasa Malaysia. You will be offered Bahasa Indonesia. That's how that's how the world sees the Malay language. The English language, before it was known as the colonial language, I think we have moved away from that. With all this advocacy for better English, etc. The kampong folk now realize the importance of the English language. I think there was a survey done by Commando, if I'm not mistaken, at the height of the debate, PTSMI, and they asked the kampong folk, what if you were given the opportunity to go to a private school with English as the medium instruction? They offer it.
They offer it.
Offer it because they know the importance of it. But it is a difficult climb. They know that. Whether they are willing to do that is a different question. So if given the opportunity, they will grab at it. And even me, even my own experience, I've been pushing for English language, and I know it works, but now I see my own children and their friends who are English proficient. They are holding very good jobs. Once you believe that English works, just look at it.
I see. Okay.
That you don't even need to speak it at home, but just be surrounded by it. In fact, it's so easy to learn the English language now. You don't need to rely on school anymore. You're surrounded. Social media, right? Social media. Well, nobody watches TV now. Netflix. This is them.
Okay.
The ways to learn English now.
I see. Okay.
But what science and maths and English is formal learning. You have to be disciplined to learn it. I mean, social media is, it's entertainment, right? In the end, we pick up a language, but science, maths, and English is very technical.
I see. Okay. Wonderful.
It's formal, and you have to be disciplined.
On a scale of 1 to 10, whereby 10 indicates complete agreement and 1 indicates absolute disagreement, what would you give to the statement, learning English and using it in day-to-day life erodes your identity, whether as a Chinese or as a Malay, as an Indian, or any other, shall we say, race or culture?
Doesn't erode at all. 1, right? Or 0.
1 or 0, yeah.
0, yeah. Doesn't erode at all. Not at all.
Not at all.
Because I think while language may identify a person, it's also culture and your way of life that identifies you, not necessarily language.
Well, okay then. As we kind of move towards discussing, the way that Malaysian education is implementing, shall we say, its English language education and also its English language policy for educating students in science and math and various other things of that nature right there. If you were to give it a score from 0 to 100, Like, what would you give it currently?
I will grade a B.
A B.
What would that be? What's a B nowadays? 60%? Because an F could be 10%, right?
You have to be very careful, Datin, because if you take math, you get one question right, then apparently you get a B.
That's actually what I'm saying, right? Exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, fine, but
Of course, I like the Malaysian education blueprint. It's perfect.
what the
And
wow.
the
That's really high praise.
This is blueprint. This is
Yeah,
blueprint which we failed to achieve.
Yes.
So the blueprint's perfect, and we've even had other countries copying our blueprint. You know, but we failed to achieve it, and we are only a year away from achieving it. We're not going to achieve it. Full stop. I think the World Bank has decided that we're not going to achieve it.
Yes.
And I think the main problem is it's that, as the World Bank says, we have made some inroads, but we failed, and we especially failed badly with the teachers. Teacher quality.
Teacher quality.
Absenteeism, not practicing differentiated learning, which means you should be when you focus on one student, you should not. If you're well trained and you practice what you've been trained, you should not neglect any other student in the classroom. That's differentiated learning. One of the complaints of the Malaysian education system is that we are too academically inclined, too exam oriented, even though the national philosophy of education is to produce a holistic child. Right. Which is why I think the Ministry of Education came up with school-based assessments, because this would mean no more teaching to the test, no more chasing A's, giving time to the student to achieve at his own capacity, you know, and then not neglecting the non-academic inclined, and less stress for the teacher and the student at the year end. This is it. And also, I think this is when our teams and PISA results were saying that the children were not thinking enough, right? Which is why they introduced TOPS, where the thinking skills. And I think it was the school-based assessments that attempted to give more time to students to think through things rather than regurgitate facts and figures. No, but along the way, I think some teachers just couldn't get the drift. No, which is why parents have now come out to say we need exams again. We need to go back to where we came from, which we don't agree with.
I see.
It's not that you're not being assessed, because you have three school-based assessments every year. So you still need to be on your toes, you know, but it's based on project work, you know, rather than A's. You know?
I see.
But the new minister has now introduced this UASA, Ujian Akhir Sesi, Ujian Academic Sesi Akhir or something like that, whereby you still have your school base, term 1, term 2, but you still have your UASA, your exams at the end of the year. But not only has she brought back the equivalent of UPSR and PT3, which was abolished, she's actually imposed it on standard 4, standard 5, standard 6, form 1, form 2, form 3.
I see.
So instead of just 2 major exams, she's introduced 6 years of exams.
I see.
So I don't know, because, you know, in primary school, the gung-ho parents, you know, they want I suppose it's more of bragging rights than anything. They want the kids to have straight A's. Some of them aim for scholarships. Some aim for residential schools. You know, but then we had to overcome that, you know, because the residential schools and whatever schools you want to enter, they still had their entrance exam, their entrance test. You know, there was still a way to assess students. Even though maybe they didn't want to accept the school-based assessments at the end of year 6 or form 3, you know.
I see. Okay.
You know, so we're going back to teaching to the test and regurgitating facts and figures, which we were running away from in the first place.
I see. Okay.
So I think this is no good.
I see.
So you're starting, standard 4, standard 4, standard 4, then 10-year-olds to exams
Exams straight away.
straight away. And there goes the critical thinking skills. It's so necessary.
So Datin, if I were to say, right, for one brief moment, you now have full power, authority, ability to do any single change that you want to the education system. It doesn't matter how many resources it will eventually end up recruiting, how many national assets, how much money, whatever have you right there. If you were to take one single action right now with this full authority vested in you right now to change a part of the education system, then what would you do?
Well, at the moment, the only thing on my mind is the dual language program. Because we timed it. The dual language program is quite amazing, actually, because we had about 100 people from outside the ministry to take part in the thinking behind a radical approach towards the English language. It was actually an instruction by the Prime Minister then to his Economic Council. And Economic Council decided that they needed to find a radical approach, this radical approach. So they commissioned Pemandu under Datuk Sri Idris Jallah. He got all these people in trade and business to come and sit around the table and come up with something that needs to be done. And in the end, we came up with two things under the English and Malay policy, NBM-NBI. We came out for English, the dual language program, and the highly immersive program. I was involved in the dual language program. So we started off with, and we timed it in such a way that students who were doing the PPSMI SPM 2020, they would continue with DLP SPM 2021.
I see.
There was no gap at all. So those schools that continued with PSMI to the end continued with DLP. Beautiful, seamless transition.
So, I guess, was that partly one of your contributions towards the Malaysian educational blueprint by any chance? Or was that even something that had come about before?
No, absolutely. I was part of it from start to finish. And
From the start to finish?
Finish.
Wow, okay.
We sat down and came up with this structure. And then these were all business people, Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers, Malaysian Employees Federation, Academy Science, a whole lot of people.
Oh, wow. I mean, because even when I think about the Malaysian education blueprint, so then I think that I have less appreciation for the context right there. But then how did that start? And then how did Paige eventually get involved?
That's so long ago. That was in 2013. I think the reason they had to include us because we were making so much noise. Because we were in the picture since 2008, right? And in 2010, we got ourselves registered as a national society. We are the only organization that represents parents. They have to recognize us. So and then the Malaysian Education Blueprint was launched in 2013. We were very much involved somehow. But I think they had labs and we were involved. We were invited to give our opinion and our what we felt about things.
I see. Okay.
So back to the dual language program. This is very important. Recently, from PPSMI, you had schools that would bring 100% science, maths, and English. Okay, DLP allowed schools to continue with PPSMI actually under the guise of DLP. 100%. So you go into this school, you will be put in a class that teaches science, maths, English, no question. But this year, the Minister of Education has changed the DLP guidelines. She now says because she is guardian of the national language, no more 100% DLP. You must introduce one non-DLP class in the school. So in many schools, standard 1 last year, 100% science, maths, and English. This year, because of the new guidelines, one class has to be sacrificed. Worse, in the case of standard 1, they are being assessed for BM. These 6-year-olds who can barely read and write are assessed for Bahasa Melayu, and if they do poorly, they won't be able to go into a dual like DLP class, which is science for maths for English. Doesn't make sense, right?
No, it doesn't make sense.
There you go.
I mean, if you can't do well, in Malay, and like you're at that point, you don't really have like language mastery, then like the problem might be that like you didn't have like the good education at home, so then that will contribute towards intergenerational inequality when eventually like you go on to like worse jobs compared to your peers, and the cycle of poverty will become worse, thereby net worsening the position of all people in Malaysia who are subjected to that treatment.
So basically,
Yes.
if your BM is no good, you will not get the opportunity to learn science and maths in English. That's
Yes.
the bottom line.
Wow.
Isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you look at the ministry is very proud that over 2,000 schools, 10,000 schools are offering DLP. But in most cases, they don't say this. There's only one class.
Mm.
Of whatever, 10 classes, at every level, only one class is DLP.
Mm.
But it's a DLP school. And then, if you sit down and count the number of primary schools, you take away Sarawak. Sarawak is a different ballgame altogether. Right? You take away Sarawak, we haven't come to Sarawak yet. It's my favorite topic. Sabah and Peninsula, primary schools, only 8% offer DLP.
Okay.
8%.
8%.
Fail, isn't it? Even lower than passing mark for AdMatch, right? SPM.
Wow.
To me, that's a fail.
Yeah. That is
the Ministry of Education. It's a
massive fail.
failure. And if you take away the compulsory DLP
Yes.
classes, right, this year, that figure isn't going to drop because it's not going to show. Because that's just counting the schools. It's not counting the classes. So in terms of schools, it doesn't drop. But in terms of classes, it's dropped. It's not showing because the ministry isn't revealing how many classes there are.
I see. Wow. Okay.
It's an illusion.
Well,
We've been conned.
we've been conned. I will introduce this partly though. Yeah, so like in an article you basically wrote, Peninsula risks falling behind Sarawak in education warrants page. I can see you smiling right there. Yes. Favorite topic. One thing that you did say right there was that yeah, in relation to this fail, so like the foundational principle of the DLP is to respect and fulfill parents' choices for their children's education, but essentially that failed, as you had essentially expressed earlier right there. You said that Sarawak's proactive approach, shout out to Jared, should serve as a wake-up call to other states, saying that you said that state education department directors, another shout out to Jared, need to ensure that their students are not left behind in an increasingly globalized economy. So Sarawak, Datin, take the floor. I mean, like, what's so great about Sarawak?
Sarawak is on a trajectory of its own and it's taking advantage of LA 63 to the fullest, to the max.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Sabah should do the same, but it's not. And they're blaming it on efforts.
On what?
We government, I don't know. Sarawak has its Jabatan Pendidikan Sarawak. Okay, Jabatan Negeri Pendidikan Sarawak. But Sarawak also has the NITD, which is the Ministry of Education, Innovation, Talent Development. And even though Jabatan Sarawak decides, NITD is the one that gives the dynamism, provides the dynamism and the funds for education go forward. The other states don't have a Ministry of Education, and they think they should. Either that or the pengarahs of all the Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri have to back up.
Oh, okay.
Because they have to look into their backyard and see what kind of labor force do I need for my state. Selangor is in business. It's called, what is it, the richest state in the peninsula? So you have to make sure your labor workforce is ready for businesses and trade in Selangor. What I see from the DLP issue is these schools that have been told you cannot have 100% DLP anymore. You must sacrifice one class. These principals know that DLP is good for the students. Why don't they fight for it?
I see. Wonderful. Okay.
They are not fighting for it. Why?
Mm.
They're afraid of disciplinary action. That is what they're afraid of.
Mm.
It's not in the best interest of the students.
I see.
If you really wanted to do the best for your children, for your students, fight for that DLP class.
Wonderful.
Get it back.
Indeed. For sure.
So I'm not talking about national schools. I'm talking about the Tamil schools as well.
Mm-hmm.
There are parents who want their children to learn science, maths, and English.
Mm-hmm.
And the minister won't allow it.
Mm.
She wants them to learn in Tamil.
Mm.
I think that's so regretful.
That is unfortunate. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, these are parents who say, I want my child to progress. I want them to learn science, maths, English. No, you cannot. Because I, as Minister of Education, is the guardian of the Tamil language. So you cannot learn science and maths in English.
Okay.
That's what we say in Parliament, by the way.
I see. I mean, to the small credit of the federal government, it has been essentially putting, in Jared Seo's words, bak kata pepatah Jared Seo, kita ada banyak wang. No, I think that's not exactly what he said. But anyway. So, well,
Maybe Sarawak.
maybe
As far as I know, being in the PIBG of my children's school, the most favorite word of the principal or pengetua guru besar is the budget. Tak pernah ada budget.
tak pernah ada budget. Okay.
So I think Gerald, you must be talking about MEITD. I think MEITD has got lots of money. They are willing to spend on education, unlike the other states. In fact, if MEITD is taking the lead for Sarawak, who is taking the lead for the other states, I wonder? For Johor, maybe it's TMJ. Maybe. But what about the others?
Mm.
Who's going to fight for the education of our children? We need a strong leader. I think TMJ's probably done it for Johor. Sarawak is already in a class of its own. We still haven't got a leader in Sabah. Forget the rest. So is it the sultans who are going to fight for our children? Or is it the Menteri Besar? I don't know. But I think there needs to be a leader in every state. And this leader, whoever he or she is, needs to tell the Minister of Education, this is what we want for our state. Don't generalize. If you're in KL and Kelantan are so different. You know, you cannot treat us the same.
I see. Okay. Now, I'd like to offer a bit of a devil's advocate perspective that I think that you are likely to disagree with right here. Now, let us consider the state of the union, like where we are currently as of this point in time. Some time ago, well, there was a survey that was conducted by the educational organization EFCEN that essentially placed Malaysia as the third best English-speaking country in the entirety of Asia. Now, you see on social media a whole bunch of Malaysians just going, oh my gosh, we're so good at English. Wow, wonderful. And so, like, when we think of that right there, if you were kind of going from a naive observer's perspective, it would seem that, you know, we're actually doing fine, you know, like, no problem whatsoever. Kenapa nak kecoh? That sort of thing right there. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's an annual report. I think the target market is actually corporates. In the private sector. Our people who are in the private sector and the corporates, they speak very good English.
They do.
That's where it is. And you don't even though what 90% of our workforce is in the private sector, 10% is government, right?
Yep.
They just get the right people to take part in the survey.
I see. It's a selection thing.
Surveys are manipulated.
Okay.
Depends on what you want, right?
All right. But I guess
we look forward to the report every year. We love it.
Because it gives us a sense that
it's happening in the corporate sector.
I see.
English is spoken widely. all the meetings are conducted in English language.
Ah, I see.
In fact, even in the government, when I was in the council, in the National Education Advisory Council, at the Ministry of Education for 2 years,
2018 to 2020, right?
our meetings at Ministry of Education were conducted in English.
I also have an interesting anecdote to share. Some years back, I went to an event at which a friend of mine spoke. That friend, incidentally, is currently at Harvard finishing his undergraduate degree. So it was for a Dewan Bahasa event. I remember very distinctly thinking, okay, ini Dewan Bahasa. Saya semestinya bercakap bahasa Melayu. So when I went up to the Dewan Bahasa officers and I asked, hey, can you give me directions, tempat ini kat mana? Then they responded to me, oh yeah, it's over here, that kind of thing, right? It was a very interesting and enlightening moment for me personally that challenged many assumptions. But when you think Datin, and perhaps we're moving towards the end right here, and when you think really about the state of education in Malaysia, like all of these different flip-flops and policies and things here and there, well, over I guess the long scale, right? So like people might kind of have certain hypotheses about how Malaysia might have turned out, essentially if we have stayed with a consistent language policy over the course of the years, perhaps. But I guess in your mind, when you think about what an alternate history might have looked like whereby we had essentially stayed with one stream of education, say the English medium education system that was effectively cancelled fortuitously, how do you suppose that history might have turned out if we had essentially just stuck with the English language?
I think we'll be equal to Singapore.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
Yeah.
You would say so?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
We all came from the same source anyway.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful.
In fact, now teachers have gone through PPSMI and they've gone through DLP.
Yes.
They were saying PPSMI is actually much more superior to DLP because nobody had a choice with PPSMI, right? With DLP, although it's parents' choice, the minister won't allow it. One. Secondly, teachers are now saying, oh, we don't really want to teach science and maths in English, even though we can. And in fact, some people will say, some parents will say, oh, the school says we haven't got enough science and maths teachers to conduct DLP. But actually, this is coming from the ministry itself. For the last 10 years, all teachers who teach science and maths have been trained to teach in both languages. So there's no more excuse about teachers not being able to teach in both languages. Even the Prime Minister said, right, we have a talent shortage of engineers. We need, we're short of what, 30,000, 50,000 engineers? I think if PPSMI did not stop, he wouldn't be saying that.
He wouldn't be saying that. Wonderful.
In fact, the number one person who opposed PPSMI was our Prime Minister now. He was very happy when PPSMI was. He was the most happy person when PPSMI was abolished because it was the Mahathir's policy.
I see. Okay.
Public enemy number one, right?
So then, as we come to the close then of this interview, thank you so much, Datin, for your time so far. Do you imagine that there will be a scenario whereby one day English language instruction is viewed as a supplement or a complement towards the development of national harmony?
Definitely. It's part, the English language is part of nation building. That's why we've been advocating for it. It's good for the economy. I mean, the Prime Minister is going around and trying to get our FDIs, right? Foreign direct investments coming into the country. Unfortunately, we're still relying on a lot of multinationals coming in to give us employment, etc. It's great. It's fantastic. That's bringing in all these FDIs, but is our labor force English proficient? Do you think these multinationals are coming in and they're going to speak Bahasa Melayu to us? I don't think so. I think they will come here and speak English and they expect us to speak English, which is why they chose us in the first place, because they think we are proficient in English, but they saw that survey, right?
And it all comes back to that right there. Yeah, and actually, like they do say that, like they promote, like literally, like MITI promotes Malaysia as an English-speaking destination, and it uses it as a grounds for why it is that companies should come into Malaysia. Yeah, to all of you out there who are saying, "Oh, like learning English will destroy your culture," right there, get a life. Whoa. All right, thank you so much for everything that you shared so far. I guess like if you were to think about, like, say, any insights or thoughts that you have, maybe like some ideas that you'd like to share, I guess like given your extensive experience of, well, advocating for the English language as a language of instruction in Malaysia, what might some of those insights be?
I think you have to depend more on, if we can't get that English medium schools going in every state for to produce English language teachers. I think we just have to depend on online learning, offline learning, get the machines in to teach children English.
Ah,
I mean, we started off during COVID-19, right? All the science and maths teachers were using all kinds of software to get the children interested in science, from their homes. And what we should do is just continue. We've already elevated ourselves during COVID-19. Continue. Don't go back and back to the whiteboard, Continue. It's not just science, maths, English, but also English. There's so many ways to learn the English language. In fact, I think there's more. Obviously, there's more knowledge in the English language than there is in Malaysian Malay. As far as scientific knowledge is concerned, there's no reason. If you want to do it, there's no stopping anybody.
Do you have any last insights that you'd like to share with the audience? Any projects maybe that you are working on at the moment that you might for the audience to be aware of?
Well, we've always we don't do activities. What we from the start, it's been about influencing policy. So we are But now that I don't know, we like that media is always supportive of us. So we are toying with the idea of going to take this to Parliament. It's not toying with the idea. I don't know whether it's whether we're gonna make any inroads or not. You see, there are small schools, right? There are small schools where there are only 2 classes at every level. For instance, CBN 1, Fondant Bukit Anas 1 is one of them. So there are 2 classes standard 1, 2 classes standard 2, right up standard 6. So both the classes have always offered science, maths, and English. But this year, 1 class has to give in to BM. So imagine our 2 classes, one is in BM, one is English now. So from 100% becomes 50%.
Yeah.
So in 6 years' time, this 100% school becomes 50% school. I think that's really terrible.
I see. So
And a lot of Tamil schools are like this too, where there are only 2 classes at every level. So before it's English all the way, right? Now it's 1 English, 1 Tamil. So by the time it's 6 years, it's a 50% DLP school. So I think this is something, plus the fact that there's so few, plus the fact that Sarawak is doing 100% in every school. And now they want to ensure, they've got a deal, the Ministry of Education, that when these students who started DLP in 2020, standard 1, when they go to 2026, they are going to be ready for their science, maths, and English until SPM.
wow.
Sarawak has got it. Basically, it's PPSMI again, relived.
Wow.
It is. Why is it that the Minister of Education is guardian of the national language in Peninsula, but not guardian of the national language in Sarawak? That is what we want to know. Why the double standards? It's all politics in education. But you vowed that we would not bring politics into education, right? Sorry about votes, isn't it? Which is back to my statement. If Sarawak Sarawak children are going to be proficient in science, maths, and English, the Peninsula students won't. They are the one who will be employed first. They will be the ones, they won't, it's not just jobs in Sarawak that they will get. They will be first choice for jobs in Peninsula. Because they will be proficient in STEM English.
Wow.
Not the Peninsula kids.
Wow. Okay.
That's what we see in the future.
Wow. And that is a clarion call to do something right there. Ladies and gentlemen, Datin Noor Azimah Rahim and Datin Noor Azimah Rahim, pathways. It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that your words will reach the right ears at some later point. And it was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Pleasure. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much.